Fort Ravenwood sprawled across the American Midwest like a small city, its red brick buildings and training grounds stretching to the horizon. On this sweltering July morning, Private Noah Miller walked slowly toward the main gate, his duffel bag weighing heavy on his shoulder. Today was supposed to be his first leave since arriving at the base 3 months ago. The military police at the gate noticed something wrong immediately. Noah's head was down, his steps unsteady. When he handed over his identification and leave papers, the guard got his first clear look at the young soldier's face. "Jesus," the guard muttered under his breath. Noah's left cheek was swollen and purple, his lips split and scabbed over. Dark bruises ringed his neck like fingerprints. "What happened to you, soldier?" the guard asked, his voice sharp with concern. Noah flinched, pulling his cap lower over his eyes. "Training accident, Sergeant. Nothing serious." But the guard wasn't buying it. Those weren't training injuries. Those were the marks of someone who'd been beaten, and beaten badly. At that moment, Colonel Jacob Price, head of the military police, was conducting his morning inspection near the gate. His trained eye immediately caught the interaction. Something about the private's posture, the way he cowered from authority, set off every alarm bell in the colonel's head. "What's the problem here?" Colonel Price approached with measured steps. The guard snapped to attention. "Sir, Private Miller has some suspicious injuries he claims are from training." Colonel Price studied Noah's face, his expression darkening. The bruising was extensive and recent. The pattern suggested multiple impacts, not accidental contact. Most damning were the finger-shaped marks around his throat. "Private Miller, I need you to come with me. Now." Noah's face went pale. "Sir, I really need to catch my bus. My family is expecting me." "Your leave can wait. We need to talk." The colonel's tone left no room for argument. The MP station was quiet in the early morning. Colonel Price led Noah to a small interview room and gestured to a chair. "Sit down, son. Can I get you some coffee?" The kindness seemed to catch Noah off guard. "Coffee would be good, sir." When the colonel returned with steaming mugs, he sat across from Noah with a deliberately relaxed posture. "Off the record, what really happened to you?" Noah stared into his coffee, hands shaking. "Training accident, sir. I've been in the Army 20 years, Noah. Those marks on your neck aren't from any drill we run here." That's when the dam burst. Noah's composure shattered, and the words poured out between sobs. "It was Corporal Tyler Mason and his crew. Every night after lights out, they'd come for me, said I needed to learn my place." Colonel Price felt rage building in his chest, but kept his voice steady. "How long has this been going on?" 3 months, sir, since I got to the unit. At first it was just verbal, but then it got worse, much worse." "Did you report this to anyone?" Noah's hesitation told the colonel everything. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez knew, sir. I tried to report it, but he said it was just soldiers being soldiers. Told me to toughen up." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Not only had abuse occurred, but the NCO chain had covered it up. "What about your platoon leader?" "No, sir. After Rodriguez shut me down, I figured there was no point. Mason said they had friends who would back their story." Colonel Price leaned forward. "Noah, listen carefully. What happened was wrong, criminal, and it stops today. Do you understand?" Fresh tears spilled down Noah's cheeks, but now they carried hope. "Yes, sir. I need you to write down everything. Every incident, every person involved. Can you do that?" Noah nodded, wiping his face. "Yes, sir. I remember every detail." As Noah began his statement, Colonel Price stepped outside and reached for his phone. The base commander needed to know immediately. Within the hour, the Criminal Investigation Division would be involved, evidence would be gathered, and justice would begin. For the first time since arriving at Fort Ravenwood, Noah allowed himself to believe that his nightmare might finally be over. The truth was out, and there would be no going back. The MP station briefing room hadn't seen this much activity in months. Colonel Price stood before his assembled team, the weight of Noah's revelation heavy in the air. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos from Criminal Investigation Division opened her laptop, ready to coordinate what would become the most comprehensive investigation Fort Ravenwood had seen in years. "What we're dealing with isn't just assault," Colonel Price began. "This is systematic abuse with command complicity. I want everything done by the book." Sergeant Santos pulled up security footage on her screen. "I've already requested all CCTV footage from the barracks area for the past 3 months. If these attacks happened regularly, we might have visual evidence." Master Sergeant Thompson, the senior MP investigator, leaned forward. "What about the storage room Miller mentioned? That's where most of the assaults allegedly took place." "Crime scene team is already en route," Colonel Price confirmed. "If this has been going on for months, there might be blood evidence, fibers, anything that backs up his story." The investigation moved swiftly. Within 2 hours, they had secured the area behind Bravo Company barracks. The storage room was cramped and dimly lit, filled with training equipment and supplies. But in the corner, investigators found what they were looking for. "Colonel, you need to see this," called Specialist Davis from the evidence team. She pointed to dark stains on the concrete floor, partially cleaned but still visible under UV light. "Definitely blood, and based on the pattern, it's from multiple incidents." More evidence emerged as the day progressed. Cell phone records showed a pattern of late-night text messages between Mason and his associates. Security cameras captured shadowy figures moving between buildings after lights out. Most damning of all, they found bloodied rags and latex gloves in a dumpster behind the barracks. By evening, the investigation team had identified 7 potential victims and over a dozen witnesses. The scope of abuse was far worse than anyone had imagined. Private Johnson from Alabama whispered his story through tears. Specialist Lee from California showed investigators healed fractures on his ribs. Each testimony painted the same picture: systematic brutalization sanctioned by negligent leadership. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was brought in for questioning. His story crumbled within minutes when confronted with documented evidence of ignored complaints. Phone records showed he'd actually laughed about the situation in text messages to other NCOs, treating it as harmless hazing rather than criminal assault. Brigadier General Patricia Williams received Colonel Price's preliminary report at 0600 hours the next morning. Her office overlooked the parade ground where thousands of soldiers conducted their morning physical training, unaware that their leadership was grappling with a crisis that threatened the very foundation of military order. "How bad is it, Jacob?" General Williams asked, setting down the thick folder of evidence. "Worse than we initially thought, ma'am. We've identified at least 7 victims, systematic cover-ups by NCO leadership, and evidence suggesting some company-grade officers knew but failed to act." The general's face hardened. In her 30-year career, she'd seen many challenges, but nothing quite like this. "What's your recommendation?" "Full court-martial proceedings for all perpetrators. Relief of duty for anyone in the chain of command who knew and failed to act. And a complete overhaul of our reporting and protection systems." Within hours, the decision was made. Mason and his associates would be transferred to the base detention facility pending court-martial. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and 2 other NCOs were relieved of duty and placed under investigation. Lieutenant Chen, the platoon leader, was suspended pending review of his role in the cover-up. The base commander called an emergency meeting with all company and battalion commanders. "This stops now," General Williams announced to the assembled officers. "I don't care if it's tradition, I don't care if it's always been done this way. Abuse of soldiers under our care is not training, it's not building character, and it's not acceptable under any circumstances." Captain Foster from Bravo Company shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Ma'am, how do we balance maintaining discipline with these new restrictions?" "You maintain discipline through leadership, Captain, not through allowing your soldiers to terrorize each other. If you can't understand that distinction, perhaps you need to reconsider your fitness for command." The message was clear. The old ways of ignoring problems and hoping they'd resolve themselves were over. Accountability would flow upward as well as downward, and no one's rank would protect them from the consequences of their failures. The pre-dawn raid came 3 days later. Military police and CID agents simultaneously hit multiple locations across the base, seizing evidence before anyone could destroy it. Mason's barracks room yielded a disturbing collection of photographs showing victims' injuries, apparently kept as trophies. Specialist Williams, Mason's roommate, broke down during questioning and revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. Tyler said, "We're making them stronger," that the army was going soft and someone needed to keep the old traditions alive. The evidence room at the MP station filled rapidly. Cell phones contained hundreds of messages coordinating attacks and celebrating successful training sessions. One video, recovered from a deleted folder, showed Mason and 3 others cornering Private Miller in the storage room while he begged them to stop. "This is hard to watch," admitted Agent Santos as she cataloged the digital evidence, "but it's exactly what we need for conviction." The investigation revealed a broader network than anyone had suspected. Phone records connected the abuse ring to similar incidents at 2 other bases, suggesting a coordinated effort to maintain what they called traditional military values through systematic brutalization of newer soldiers. Captain Martinez from the Judge Advocate General's office reviewed the evidence with grim satisfaction. "We have enough here to bury them all. Multiple counts of assault, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and conduct unbecoming. Some of these soldiers are looking at decades in military prison." Meanwhile, attempts to cover up evidence continued. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez tried to delete his social media accounts and destroy his personal phone. Corporal Patterson attempted to intimidate potential witnesses, telling them they'd be next if they testified. These efforts only added additional charges and demonstrated the systematic nature of the abuse. Noah Miller, meanwhile, had returned from leave to find a completely transformed environment. The predators were gone, removed from the barracks like a cancer finally excised. His fellow soldiers, previously too terrified to speak up, now came forward with their own stories of survival and resilience. The formation that assembled on Fort Ravenwood's main parade ground that Friday morning was unlike any in the base's history. 5,000 soldiers stood in perfect ranks as General Williams prepared to address the systemic failures that had allowed abuse to flourish in their midst. "Soldiers," her voice carried across the field through strategically placed speakers, "we are here because we failed you. We failed to protect those who volunteered to serve their country, and we failed to maintain the standards that make our military the finest fighting force in the world." The general's words cut through the morning air with the precision of a blade. Effective immediately, hazing is not training, abuse is not character building, and silence in the face of such behavior makes you complicit in the crime. New policies were announced on the spot. Anonymous reporting systems would be installed throughout the base. Surprise inspections would occur at random intervals. Most importantly, a victim advocacy program would provide immediate protection and support for anyone reporting abuse. Sergeant Major Harrison, the senior enlisted soldier on base, stepped forward to address the formation. "Some of you might think this makes us weak. You're wrong. An army that preys on its own soldiers isn't strong. It's broken. Starting today, we fix what's broken." The transformation was immediate and visible. Within 24 hours, 3 additional victims came forward with reports of abuse in other units. Rather than being swept under the rug, each case received immediate attention and thorough investigation. Private Miller found himself in an unexpected role as other soldiers sought him out for advice and support. The young man who had cowered in fear just weeks earlier now stood as a symbol of courage for speaking truth to power. "I never wanted to be a poster child for this," Noah told Colonel Price during one of their regular check-ins. "But if my story helps one other soldier avoid what I went through, then maybe something good came from all that pain." Training throughout the base shifted to emphasize teamwork and mutual support rather than dominance and intimidation. Drill sergeants were retrained on the difference between challenging soldiers to excel and breaking them down through abuse. The Fort Ravenwood courtroom had never been so packed. Military personnel, family members, and media representatives filled every available seat as the court-martial of Corporal Tyler Mason and his associates began. The charges read like a catalog of military crimes: assault, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and conduct unbecoming a soldier. Mason sat at the defendant's table, his military bearing replaced by the slouched posture of a man facing the consequences of his actions. His military attorney, Captain Davis, had advised him to plead guilty in hopes of a reduced sentence, but Mason's arrogance had prevented him from accepting responsibility. "The prosecution will prove," announced Major Rodriguez from the Judge Advocate General's office, "that the defendants engaged in a systematic campaign of abuse that violated every principle the United States Army holds sacred." The evidence was overwhelming. Video footage showed the attacks in graphic detail. Medical testimony documented the extensive injuries inflicted on multiple victims. Phone records revealed the premeditated nature of the conspiracy. When Noah Miller took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. His voice was steady as he recounted 3 months of systematic torture, his words painting a picture of calculated cruelty that shocked even seasoned military personnel. "Did you ever fight back?" asked Mason's defense attorney during cross-examination. "No, sir," Noah replied. "I was taught to respect the chain of command. Corporal Mason outranked me, and when I tried to report through proper channels, I was told to handle it myself." The defense's strategy of portraying the abuse as mutual combat fell apart completely when other victims testified. 7 soldiers told similar stories of being targeted, isolated, and brutalized while their leaders either participated or looked the away. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, testifying under immunity, admitted his role in covering up reports. "I thought it was just soldiers being soldiers," he said, his voice barely audible. "I never realized how serious it had become." The military judge, Colonel Thompson, showed no mercy in his verdict. Mason received 15 years in military prison and a dishonorable discharge. His associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. The NCOs who enabled the abuse faced their own court, martial and administrative punishments. "The conduct of the defendants," Judge Thompson stated during sentencing, "represents everything the United States Army stands against. You took an oath to protect and defend, but instead you terrorized those you were sworn to lead." Noah Miller's return to full duty at Fort Ravenwood marked a transformation that extended far beyond one soldier's recovery. The young private who had once trembled at the sight of his superiors now walked through the base with quiet confidence, his survival serving as inspiration to others who had suffered in silence. The barracks where his nightmare had unfolded looked the same from the outside, but everything about the environment had changed. New leadership had been installed from top to bottom. Sergeant First Class Johnson, Noah's new squad leader, made his expectations clear from day one. "My job is to train you to be the best soldier you can be," Johnson told the assembled squad. Anyone who confuses training with abuse will find themselves explaining their actions to me personally, and trust me, that's a conversation you don't want to have. The old storage room where Mason had conducted his training sessions had been converted into a soldier resource center, complete with computers for troops to access mental health resources and legal assistance. The transformation of the space from a chamber of horrors to a place of healing seemed to symbolize the broader changes sweeping through Fort Ravenwood. Noah found himself in the unexpected role of mentor to newer soldiers arriving at the base. Rather than the cycle of abuse that had characterized previous generations, these young troops were welcomed into an environment that prioritized their development and well-being. "You don't have to prove yourself by taking abuse," Noah told a group of newly arrived privates during an orientation session. "Real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult." The weekly counseling sessions that had initially felt like a burden had become a source of strength for Noah. Dr. Martinez, the base psychologist, helped him process not just the trauma of his abuse, but also the complex emotions that came with being the catalyst for such sweeping change. "Survivor's guilt is common," Dr. Martinez explained during one of their sessions. "You might feel responsible for what happened to others, or guilty that your situation improved while theirs didn't. But remember, speaking up took incredible courage, and that courage has protected countless other soldiers." Noah's family visited for the first time since the court-martial concluded. His parents, who had been devastated to learn what their son had endured, were amazed by the confident young man who greeted them at the base entrance. "You've grown up, Noah," his mother said through tears during their reunion dinner. "Not because of what they did to you, but because of how you chose to respond to it." 1 year after Noah Miller first walked through the gates of Fort Ravenwood as a terrified private, he stood before the same entrance as a proud specialist, his promotion earned through merit rather than survival. The base that had once harbored systematic abuse now served as a model for military installations worldwide. The changes implemented in the wake of the investigation had become permanent fixtures of military life. The anonymous reporting system had identified and stopped abuse in its early stages at dozens of locations. The victim advocacy program had been expanded to all Army installations. Most importantly, a cultural shift had taken place that prioritized the welfare of soldiers over outdated notions of traditional military toughness. General Williams, now promoted to her 3rd star, often used Fort Ravenwood as an example in her speeches to other commanders. "We learned that a military that protects its own soldiers is stronger than one that allows them to be victimized," she would tell audiences of senior officers. "True military discipline comes from mutual respect and shared purpose, not from fear and intimidation." Noah had received offers to transfer to other bases, to start fresh somewhere his past wasn't known. But he chose to stay at Fort Ravenwood, becoming part of the solution rather than running from the problem. His presence served as a daily reminder that speaking truth to power, no matter how difficult, was always the right choice. The memorial garden that had been established behind the former storage room bloomed with flowers planted by soldiers past and present. A simple plaque read, "Dedicated to those who found the courage to speak when silence seemed safer." Noah often visited the garden, sometimes alone, sometimes with the young soldiers he now mentored. Corporal Mason and his associates remained in military prison, their appeals exhausted and their futures forever marked by their choices. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been discharged and struggled to find employment, his military record permanently stained by his failure to protect the soldiers under his care. But Fort Ravenwood had moved beyond the shadow of their crimes. Training was tougher than ever, but it was training that built soldiers up rather than tearing them down. Leaders led by example rather than through intimidation, and soldiers knew that their reports of wrongdoing would be taken seriously and acted upon swiftly. As Noah prepared for his next assignment, he had been selected to attend the prestigious Warrior Leader course. He reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The young man who had once been afraid to speak above a whisper now trained others to find their own voices. "The Army broke me," he told a group of new recruits during his final orientation session at Fort Ravenwood. "But then it gave me the tools to rebuild myself stronger than before." That's what real military training should do. It should challenge you to be better, not tear you down for someone else's entertainment. The scars from his ordeal would never fully fade, but they had become part of his strength rather than symbols of his weakness. Noah Miller had survived not just the abuse itself, but the harder challenge of rebuilding trust in the institution he had sworn to serve. Fort Ravenwood stood as proof that change was possible, that even the most entrenched problems could be solved with courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. The base that had once hidden its darkest secrets now proudly displayed its transformation, serving as a beacon of hope for soldiers everywhere who refused to accept that abuse was simply the price of military service. The ending was not just Noah's victory, but a victory for every soldier who would never have to endure what he had suffered, thanks to his courage to speak when silence would have been easier.